Okay, everyone. Well, thank you for tuning in and welcome to CTO Talk. I am your host, Matt Ferrari. On this 30-minute program, we get to discuss the issues, the challenges, and the opportunities that are impacting healthcare technology. You can follow the show on Twitter at #CTO Talk or follow me at MP Ferrari. With me today, I'm honored and really excited to have Aaron, the founder and CEO of BehaVR. And today we're really going to dive into VR and what we're seeing as a new way to take a look at healthcare. So welcome to the show, Aaron.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Glad to be with you.
Aaron, would you mind, I've had the privilege of meeting you before and know that you've got a deep healthcare IT background, and it didn't start today. And so would you mind kind of giving folks a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure, Matt. Happy to. I have been obsessed with technology and creating things with technology since childhood, which is getting to be quite a long time ago now. Came of age back in the early days of the microcomputer era. So fell in love with what we could do with tech back then, and have always worked in IT roles of one form or another from my earliest roles. And then working in the financial services industry for many, many years, and then joining healthcare in 2006 when I joined Humana. And, at that point, in the last 12 years since then, it became really a love affair on two fronts. One is with technology and what we can do with tech. And then the other is, as many people working in healthcare will tell you, and you know this from the work you do, it's extra motivating when you get to work on something like people's health, because it's just so important to us. When you don't have it, pretty much all your other problems pale in comparison. So, so been really fortunate to get to work on high impact things in healthcare for the last 12 years.
Excellent. So speaking of high impact, would you mind, walking the audience through? A lot of them are thinking about their own healthcare IT startups or their own, crises that they want to address in healthcare. Would you mind kind of walking the audience through what's setting you off on this new venture?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I had thoughts and ideas and designs about my own business for many years. I was also fortunate to have a great role with a great company at Humana. So I delayed that for many years and then ultimately got to a point where it made sense for me to take the leap and start my own firm. And one of the things that influenced me, I remember a speech that I wasn't at, but I listened to a recording of Larry Page speaking to a group of entrepreneurship students at Stanford, I believe. And his guidance to them was, if you're going to take on a problem, take on a really, really big problem, the biggest problem you can find, because smaller ones are just as hard and not as much fun. And that really stuck with me. And in my years at Humana, we spent so much time thinking about how do we get and keep our members healthier, because that's the ultimate win-win in that business, right? You have healthier, happier patients. They spend less on healthcare. That's how Humana does well. And because we had so many Medicare Advantage members, taxpayers did well, at the same time. And so I was already very tuned into this really big, important problem of helping people stay healthier. And yet, despite all of our incredible efforts at Humana and in so many places in the healthcare industry, by some measures, we're not really winning that battle. We're still, as a population, getting sicker. Some of that's because we're getting older as well. But we have so many folks with one or more chronic diseases, and healthcare spending in the U.S. is still unsustainable, right? We're at $3.5 trillion and heading for $4 trillion. And I saw a projection that in not so many years in the future, we'll be at $8 trillion. I mean, it is eating the economy.
Wow.
So it's unsustainable fiscally, and it's really, really bad for people, right? There's all that pain and suffering. And so with that as a backdrop and thinking about, that is really the problem. One could argue maybe climate change is a bigger problem, right? If you believe that that's risking our survival as a species. But besides that, this is the problem we've got to solve, at least in the U.S., and it's increasingly a problem globally. So huge problem, definitely worth focusing on, and yet we clearly need new approaches, right? We've done so many things to help people try and get healthier, and we have incentive programs, and wellness and rewards and trackers and so forth. And those are all good things. They're good as far as they go. But I felt like there was something else that needed to be done to get to this core issue of people's motivations and how we manage ourselves. And I wasn't entirely clear then, still not entirely clear, but have a better understanding. But when I founded BehaVR almost 3 years ago, wasn't exactly sure how to solve it, but here's what I knew. Being a tech geek my whole life, I knew that virtual reality was about to go sort of mainstream from a consumer perspective. And that was really kicked off by the Facebook's acquisition of Oculus. And all of that really set off a whole investment cycle around VR. And lots of people became aware that this is a time where we can bring VR out of the lab. And there's literally 2 decades of research about medical applications of VR and into the consumer grade era, right? And the reason for VR being connected to this issue of health is it's just got incredible psychological power. So I'll kind of pause there, but that's the general idea of biggest, most important problem I could think of with this moment in time where we had a new technological solution.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I actually grew up in a home with a psychologist and a neuropsychologist as my family, and so medicine through psychology and medicine through other non-traditional methods has something that we've been talking about forever. But realistically, you're Aaron, you're really operating in kind of that immersive technology space. What is the state of that industry today, and how do you operate it, on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's an exciting time to be working in this space. As I mentioned previously, VR is not new. It's literally been around for a few decades in lab settings with big, expensive, clunky solutions that weren't very good from a experience or UX perspective. And I won't go deep into it in this call. Your listeners probably know this and can certainly Google it. But the Oculus Kickstarter project, which quickly, just a couple of years later became an acquisition by Facebook, as I mentioned, set off this huge investment cycle. So in 2016, when we launched BehaVR, the Oculus Rift was just about to ship as a consumer product. And that was state of the art. It was better than anything that had come before. And I'll spare you all the detailed specs, but here you had a headset with a pretty nice field of view, about 110-degree field of view, pretty high-resolution graphics, minimal screen door effect where the screen is so close to your eyes that you can sort of see the pixels. But, tethered to a PC, required a big, beefy PC, cables and external sensors and so on. But we were excited to have it. That was a big deal to have the Oculus Rift. And we would spend, let's say, $2,500 on a setup for our earliest clinical applications. And what we quickly found was not nearly convenient enough for scaling in clinical settings where you have a physical therapist or a physician or what have you that doesn't have a tech staff to deal with these things. It just wasn't nearly convenient enough. And the experience was good, but not great. And it was expensive. Just 2 years later, we're now deploying with Oculus Go, which is an order of magnitude cheaper, $200 to $300 for a headset, no tethers, no PC, no external sensors, and a big step up in terms of visual clarity and experience. I won't go into the details just yet, maybe later in the call around 6 degrees of freedom and 3 degrees of freedom and tracking and all those kinds of things. But the point is rapid advancement at a high level.
Absolutely. So Aaron, as you think about how to, now that the technology is continuing to advance, how do we get the end patients to really embrace the technology and start to understand that this is really a interesting way of potentially improving healthcare across the board? How do we educate and evangelize this?
That's a fascinating element, I think, of what we're doing, which is perhaps for the first time, we have a digital medium and we can create experiences within that medium that are both engaging and educational and, let's say, entertaining and therapeutic. And so, a pill, for example, has therapeutic value, but you can't really argue it's very entertaining, right? You just take it and you look for a good result, whatever that outcome is that you're hoping for. Other digital engagement tools, smartphone apps and those kinds of things in the healthcare space generally are educational. Maybe they're a little bit motivational. Maybe they try and keep you engaged in a learning journey. Maybe you're getting coaching. But again, it's not really that engaging or entertaining. And it doesn't have direct therapeutic value generally, right? It's more of a cognitive exercise, getting you to think differently about something or maybe act slightly differently. With VR, we have this really interesting effect where all of those things I just said are true about being educational and driving engagement and getting, people in a different place from a motivational perspective. And it can have direct therapeutic value. So some of and there are many use cases of VR in medicine. One of the more commonly discussed ones recently is VR has been proven clinically effective for alleviating acute pain. So in the moment, you're feeling pain from an injury or surgery or childbirth or other things, and you go into a VR experience and, our brains have limited bandwidth and you're basically transported, we call it presence in VR, off to this other experience, and the pain is significantly lessened in that moment. So there is this direct therapeutic effect. So it's pretty fascinating how we have this new medium, which can be both engaging and sort of traditional consumer engagement and therapeutic at the same time, which gives us a lot of new opportunities to build new therapeutic experiences, which are also entertaining and keep people coming back.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone who abhors taking pills, I can empathize with other methods that could be more, entertaining and therapeutic for sure. Aaron, over the weekend, one of the videos I was watching on Behavior's website cites that the CDC, says that 50,000 plus people died from opioids just last year, and another 50 million Americans are, in constant chronic pain. And the VR market has obviously been estimated to reach over $15 billion in 2020. I'd love for you to help educate the audience. How can, what are some examples that VR and technology can help to address these, opioid crisis and really help manage chronic pain?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a couple of things on that. So obviously the opioid crisis needs new solutions, right? And some of the folks who get caught up in that, unfortunately, got there because of, maybe it was recreational drug use that got them started or something other than some health condition, which set them on a path that, has really bad implications for them. But there's a whole lot of folks who are caught up with, dependence or addiction to opioids who got there because they started with pain. And, I mentioned acute pain a few moments ago where you can with VR, you can distract people from acute pain. Chronic pain is different. Acute pain is there to keep you alive. If you bang your thumb with a hammer, it warns you, don't do that again, right? Move it, get to safety. And that's something that keeps us alive in the face of threats. Chronic pain is different. It could start with an injury or trauma or surgery or what have you. But for some people, the nervous system doesn't calm back down as quickly as for many of us. And so with this ongoing pain where the nervous system is on high alert and being more sensitive, there is a response in the nervous system that the brain interprets as danger and creates pain signals when in fact there may not be any. So what happens is people will often adapt and have these maladaptive coping strategies like moving less. They'll have a fear of movement. They will often begin taking pain medications, including opioids. And there was a whole, overprescribing period that we went through. Opioids are interesting because while they certainly mask the pain while they're having their effect, as they wear off, you end up with your nervous system being more sensitive. And then there's a cascade of things that happens for some people. So they'll move less, they have the pain medications, they'll sometimes catastrophize their pain a little bit. They get really, it has a big impact on their life. And they'll spiral through this combination of psychosocial elements into worse pain. Now, you got to be really careful because there are a whole range of reasons why people will end up with chronic pain. Some of it is made worse because of these psychosocial elements. One of the worst things you can say to somebody suffering pain, if you say that the wrong way, they'll think you're saying, oh, you think it's in my head. which is not the case, okay? It's just that these coping strategies will get interpreted by the brain as something that needs to be, it's really the brain that decides that there's pain going on. So I'm going a little deep on that, but here's really the point. Using VR and this unique immersive capability in VR, we can teach people about how their nervous system works through educational content, and we have their full attention. There's no distraction in there. Get engaging exercises and learning experiences. We do motivational content. So we'll do patient narratives. Let's hear from Matt and let's hear his story that he went through a similar journey to your own and how he got better. And then we also have the direct activations and skill building around things like mindfulness practice, being able to detect your own state of emotional arousal and up or down regulate emotions in real time. So this is where we get the educational, motivational, and activation of these therapeutic experiences going on to help people understand and then manage their chronic pain differently. So this is creating an alternative to managing pain, an alternative to opioids, which is sorely needed.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And just thinking about the problem in the market, I would assume that this is an opportunity, forgive the word, Aaron, but I would assume it's an opportunity for these things to almost go viral, right? As someone gets the experience of reducing chronic pain through this therapy, I would assume, they're going to tell their friends, their neighbors, their family, and we just start to see kind of an explosion in the market.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Matt. And I think that, what we're really doing, I've mentioned two use cases now about pain, right? Acute pain through distraction, chronic pain through this new skill building. But we really believe there's an underlying kind of core therapeutic effect at work, which is helping people understand and then build skills of stress resilience and emotional regulation. So in the face of some noxious or negative stimulus, to build skills around realizing their own ability to interpret and modulate their responses. So you get into things that are not new to VR, certainly. These have been around a long time, whether it's things like mindfulness practice, which go back millennia, or things like cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, which are obviously much more recent, let's say 50 years old or so, but things that have been proven in the analog world really well. We are building these experiences which we believe we can scale and replicate to address not just issues like chronic pain, but stress resilience broadly, and the effects of chronic stress are pretty horrible. That's a whole episode or podcast in itself. And then other, destructive lifestyle choices and challenges like weight management and obesity and smoking cessation, and right up through our longer term plan is to build prescription digital therapeutics for addressing things like generalized anxiety disorder, major depressive disorder, and other things, all with this therapeutic core around stress resilience and emotional regulation. So we think that we have an ability now to empower people. We had one of our patients say, the things I learned in VR, I can now apply out in my real life, my normal life, and I feel like I have superpowers. And when we heard that, that was a high five moment, when you can equip people with those kinds of capabilities.
Wow. Absolutely. I want to remind the audience that if you're just tuning in, I'm Matt Ferrari of CTO Talk, and we have the opportunity today to talk to Aaron Gani, the founder and CEO of BehaVR. And we're talking about how to solve, some of healthcare's biggest problems with technologies like VR. And Aaron, to that point, stepping back for a moment, you just mentioned quite a few use cases, both, present use cases and in the future. As the CEO, I'd love for you to help, the audience understand, how do you decide which healthcare market problem to solve first? How do you really understand which one to attack?
Yeah, well, I'm fortunate because I got those sort of 10 years before I started the company at Humana, where you come to understand, like most things in healthcare, new solutions you got to be effective in a couple of dimensions. One is you have to help the patient with their health, right? You have to have clinical effect. The other thing is you have to solve a business problem, because healthcare has this interesting and challenged multi-sided model of economics. So you have to be able to articulate how you help a healthcare provider thrive and grow in their business, how you help a payer save money, and so on. And so the really short version is we are working through a process where, since this is a pretty new set of technologies and we still have a lot of work ahead of us to prove efficacy and other things over time, we started in a part of the market where we can really just help providers offer better services to their patients. So it's sort of in healthcare parlance, it's a fee-for-service argument, right? Better service, more patients, better for your business, better for your patients. Longer term, as we have more clinical evidence, we'll work more towards where healthcare is going, which is really about value-based care and paying for outcomes, right? And this is where payers are really leading the way to say we can't just keep paying kind of by the drink for healthcare. We have to reward things that actually get people healthier. And that's, in a nutshell, how we evolve our thinking, or how we set our priorities with the experiences that we create and the way that we take those to market.
Excellent. Yeah. To switch gears for a moment, Aaron, as you think about, the work that you do tying these emerging technologies and things like healthcare analytics and data, and really making things possible that simply weren't before, even as, 5 years ago, where do you see the market going?
Okay, I love that question. Here's the way I often will describe what we are doing, because we've talked a lot about VR, right, and the unique psychological power of this immersive medium. But here's the key. That is just like the icing on the cake in some ways. It is clearly an important part of what we're doing. But what we think the long-term play here is creating a new delivery system for behavioral health. And behavioral health, our brains and our psyche and all the stuff we talked about a few minutes ago is so important. Our stress resilience and mindset is so important to our overall physical health. And yet the behavioral health system in the US is really challenged. It's capacity constrained. It's inconvenient. There's still stigma associated with, people don't want to think of themselves or have others think of themselves as having a mental health condition or behavioral health challenge. And who's got the time, right, to get scheduled? First, you got to find a provider, get scheduled, go wait in their office. There's transportation barriers, there's cost and expense challenges, and so on. The moment we're at, Matt, is really enabled by a set of converging exponential technologies. So it's really about cloud. It's about the fact that we have mobility. It's about increasing levels of healthcare data interoperability. It's about the incredible power of analytics and machine learning that are further enabled by each of those things. It's combining all of that, the ability to bring information about the patient into the cloud, analyze it more deeply and faster than we've ever been able to do, and then through mobility and these immersive media, deliver a healthcare experience to them wherever they are. And I talked right at the beginning of this call about this sort of dual, it's engaging and it's therapeutic. So an experience where you go in and you're in this welcoming, neat, branded place. We call ours the happy place. We want to take you to your happy place in VR. And we can make that engaging and fun and exciting, but then we can also make it therapeutic. And you can do that on your couch at home, on a college campus setting, in a retail healthcare setting, and the list just goes on and on. And so that is a really interesting moment in time where those converging and exponentially, expanding technologies create an entirely new system to drive our behavioral health and thus our physical health forward.
Absolutely. And I love that, we're bringing a lot of both the data and the emotion into kind of the customer experience, and speaking of data, Aaron, before the podcast started, we were talking a little bit about interoperability. How do you see this technology, approaching, the kind of the standards around interoperability that are out there today?
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time in my role at Humana working on this question of interoperability. We bought companies, we invested tens, if not millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in that challenge. And the industry is still struggling with it, but it's getting better every year, right? The announcements even this year at HIMSS from ONC and so forth are getting us to a really interesting place from an interoperability perspective. As a startup founder and manager, the last thing we want to do is reinvent wheels that others have already invented, right? So this is one of the reasons, you and I met in my days at Humana when we did work with Clear Data, as I founded BehaVR, I went straight to ClearData because I need, it's difficult to manage healthcare workload in the cloud in a HIPAA compliant, super secure way. And as a small startup, it's even harder. So ClearData helps me with that. With respect to interoperability, we will look for and are evaluating partners to help us not reinvent any wheels. We know that we're going to connect to multiple EMRs. It's going to be about a whole variety and diversity in that respect over time. And so we'll look for partners to help us do that. And it'll be easier now than it's ever been in the past. The other thing I'd say is that we designed and architected our company around this notion that you have a core patient data model or record in the cloud. Yes, we'll work with partners, but the point is it's across experiences and across therapeutic areas. We have to start with this single record about the patient, who they are, what we know about them from other data sources, and everything they do during our experiences. We can capture an amazing amount of interaction information as well as biometric information that we stream in real time. And that's all going into this data set that helps us understand how to create the most engaging experiences that drive the best outcomes. And as we build our proprietary data set around that, that'll allow us to have experiences not driven by rule sets, but by algorithms over time. So, we couldn't even begin this strategy without thinking about all those things I mentioned, cloud and data, interoperability, and a common patient record. It's just integral to new healthcare solutions, I believe.
Absolutely. And Aaron, speaking of cloud, I think we have time for one more question. Lots of large enterprise healthcare organizations and also healthcare startups are, focusing on, Microsoft's technologies to deliver their solutions. And I know that BehaVR is cloud-based, and you guys have made some technology selections. Would you mind just educating the audience on, why you made your technology stack decisions the way you did, just so, in case they're out there looking and considering, hey, do I use, AWS cognitive learning, or do I use Microsoft machine learning and Cortana? These kind of questions I get, literally every week. So I'd love for you to maybe explain to the audience, why did BehaVR make the decisions that you guys did?
Yeah, sure. So if, there's really decisions on a few layers. So I'll mention in the immersive space first, because it's a little bit unique. Most companies who are creating VR or AR experiences are doing that with Unity, which is a game engine and tool set for creating these experiences, or Unreal Engine. And there are some other options, but those are the market leaders. And we use Unity, and that was really about ease of finding people who are skilled in that, and then it's a whole community and with extensions and plugins and assets and so on. So we use Unity for front-end development. Today, because these VR assets are so large, you can't move them around in real time. You need to pre-locate them on the headsets, but we're looking forward to 5G. We have discussions going on with AT&T about, the work they're doing in 5G, and looking forward to a day when we can potentially, and this is what AT&T is proving out with even some recent news about this, but streaming even these super large 3D and or, whether it's real world video or animations and CGI environments in real time to headsets, which would create the ability to put the really hardcore math in the cloud and then make these headsets just edge devices, which has lots of implications for cost and convenience and size and weight and so on. So that's one dimension of it. The other dimension on the cloud side, your listeners are probably pretty knowledgeable about, the relative merits of AWS and Azure and Google's cloud platform and so on. We actually started out in AWS, and then in some discussions with some very large retailers who we're working on a deal with, candidly, at one point they said, "No, you're not working with AWS, right?" And initially I thought this was a concern about public cloud, and I started explaining why public cloud is not and then I was, oh, okay, actually it's about Amazon competing with them. So, it's interesting how, Amazon is just so big and such a presence in so many markets now. And, when they come to your industry, it tends to impact market cap and valuations, and everybody freaks out a little bit. So they're going to have to deal with that. We ended up deciding to move to Azure. because we do have clients in the retail space and they are concerned about Amazon. So we certainly love Amazon's tech, and we're also doing things, testing some things cross-platform, like many people will do. I think that's where we'll all end up, is sourcing, from kind of a multi-cloud strategy. But that was our particular journey.
Excellent, very helpful. And Aaron, thank you for joining us today. And for all those listeners, thanks for tuning in. If you have a comment about today's episode, please follow #CTO Talk, or you can follow me on Twitter at @MPFerrari. You can always learn more about CTO Talk at HealthcareNOW Radio or at cleardata.com. I'm Matt Ferrari, and until we talk again, have a good week, everyone. Aaron, thank you so much. I hope we got everything that we intended to.